Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Aurora's Dawn, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he kept sipping it anyway. The ship had been traveling through empty space for 3 weeks now, mapping new star systems on the edge of human territory. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors," said Lisa Carter from her position at the navigation console. She was a young officer, only 2 years out of the academy, but she had sharp eyes and quick reflexes. Jake walked over to her station and looked at the display. "What kind of strange?" "Multiple contacts, sir, big ones. I count at least 50 ships moving in formation about 2 light hours away from our position." Jake felt his stomach tighten. Human space was supposed to be empty out here. No colonies, no trade routes, no military patrols. "Are you sure they're ships?" Lisa ran the scan again, her fingers dancing across the control panel. "Yes, sir. They're definitely artificial, and they're huge. Some of them are bigger than anything we've ever built." Tony Rodriguez looked up from the weapons console. He was a big man with thick arms and a scar across his left cheek from a mining accident years ago. "Captain, those readings don't match any human ship designs I know." Jake's mouth went dry. First contact with alien life had always been a possibility, but most scientists thought it would happen closer to Earth, not out here in the frontier. "Karen, get me a full system diagnostic. I want to make sure our sensors are working properly." Karen Phillips, the chief engineer, was already running checks from her station near the back of the bridge. She was the oldest member of the crew, a woman in her 50s who had been working on starships since before Jake was born. "All systems are green, Captain. The sensors are working fine." "Then we're looking at alien ships," Jake said quietly. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Lisa watched her screen as the formation of ships changed course. "Sir, they're heading toward us. Current speed suggests they'll reach us in about 6 hours. Jake sat down in his captain's chair and thought hard. Aurora's Dawn was an exploration vessel, not a warship. They had basic defensive systems and a small crew of 30 people. If these aliens were hostile, the ship wouldn't last long in a fight. "Open a channel to Earth," he ordered. "Priority transmission." "Channel open, sir." Jake cleared his throat. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Federation ship Aurora's Dawn. We have made contact with unknown alien vessels in the Kepler 442 system. The aliens appear to be approaching our position. We'll attempt diplomatic contact." "Morrison, out." He turned to Tony. "What kind of firepower do we have?" 2 plasma cannons, defensive shields, and about a dozen mining charges we could use as improvised weapons," Tony replied. "Not much against 50 alien ships." "Let's hope they're friendly," Jake said, though he didn't really believe it. Hours passed slowly. The alien fleet grew larger on the sensors as it approached. Karen worked to boost the ship's power systems while Tony checked and rechecked their limited weapons. Lisa monitored the approaching ships, counting them and measuring their size. "Captain," she said during the 4th hour, "I'm getting better readings now. The largest ships are over 2 kilometers long. The smallest ones are still bigger than us." Jake nodded grimly. "Any response to our transmissions?" They had been broadcasting greeting messages in dozens of languages, along with mathematical concepts and peaceful intentions. So far, there had been no reply. "Nothing, sir." They're maintaining radio silence. When the alien fleet was 1 hour away, everything changed. The communications console suddenly came alive with an incoming transmission. The signal was strong and clear, automatically translated by the ship's computer systems. "Primitive vessel of the 3rd planet," the voice said. It was deep and harsh, like rocks grinding together. "You will surrender immediately. Lower your defensive systems and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. Lisa was pale but determined. Tony's hands were already moving toward the weapons controls. Karen was watching him carefully, waiting for orders. "Open a channel," Jake said calmly. "Channel open, sir." Jake stood up and spoke clearly into the microphone. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Federation. We appreciate your introduction to galactic civilization, but we must respectfully decline your offer of conquest. We suggest you find easier prey elsewhere." There was a long pause. Then the alien voice came back, sounding confused. "You decline? This is not a negotiation, primitive creature. This is a demand for surrender." "And this is our polite refusal," Jake replied. "We're not interested in being conquered today, or any other day for that matter." Another pause. Longer this time. The crew could hear angry voices speaking in the alien language before the translation resumed. "You do not understand. We are the Korvaxi Empire. We have conquered 47 star systems and hundreds of worlds. No species has ever refused our demands." Jake smiled grimly. "Well, congratulations. You just met your first. Your ship is small and weak. You cannot resist us." "Maybe not," Jake admitted. "But we're going to try anyway. That's what humans do." The alien seemed genuinely puzzled by this response. "This is illogical. You will be destroyed." "Probably," Jake agreed. "But some of you are going to die with us. Are you ready for that?" Lisa watched her console as 3 of the alien ships broke away from the main fleet and headed toward them at high speed. "Captain, 3 ships are approaching. They'll be here in 20 minutes. Jake sat back down in his chair. "Tony, charge the weapons. Karen, give me everything the engines have got. Lisa, plot us a course through that asteroid field we passed an hour ago." "Sir, the asteroids are dense. It'll be dangerous," Lisa warned. "Good," Jake said. "Dangerous is exactly what we need right now." The first battle between humans and aliens was about to begin. The 3 Korvaxi destroyers moved through space like hunting wolves, their dark hulls gleaming under the distant starlight. Admiral Zethkar watched from the bridge of his flagship as the small human vessel tried to escape toward the asteroid field. "Foolish creatures," he muttered to his second-in-command. "They run to the rocks like frightened prey." The human ship was much smaller than even his smallest destroyer. Its hull looked fragile, built for exploration rather than war. Zethkar had conquered dozens of species, and they all followed the same pattern. First came the fear, then desperate, bargaining, and finally surrender when they realized resistance was hopeless. But these humans had skipped straight to running. At least they were showing some sense. "Instruct the destroyers to disable their engines," Zethkar ordered. "We will take them alive for questioning. The Empire will want to know about their homeworld before we begin the conquest." Captain Jake. Morrison gripped his chair as Aurora's Dawn shook under the stress of maximum acceleration. The ship's engines were pushing beyond safe limits, but they needed every bit of speed they could get. "How long until we reach the asteroids?" he asked. Lisa. Carter's fingers flew over her controls as she calculated their course. 3 minutes, Captain, but the alien ships are gaining on us." Tony Rodriguez studied his weapons display. "Captain, I've been analyzing their ships during the approach. They're using standard military formations just like the textbooks back at the academy." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "They're flying in a perfect triangle pattern, maintaining exact distances between ships. It's textbook fleet tactics, but it's also predictable." Tony's eyes lit up with an idea. "Sir, I think they've never fought anyone who actually fought back." Karen Phillips looked up from her engineering station. "Captain, I've been thinking about those mining charges. We use them to blast apart asteroids, right? Well, what if we turn the asteroids into weapons?" Jake felt a spark of hope. Humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years. They had learned every dirty trick, every desperate tactic, every way to turn weakness into strength. Maybe these aliens were about to get their first lesson in human warfare. "Talk to me, Karen." "We detonate the mining charges inside the asteroid field. The explosions will send rock fragments flying in all directions at high speed. It'll be like a shotgun. Blast in space." "But that would be random," Lisa protested. "We can't aim the fragments," Tony grinned. "We don't need to aim if they're flying in perfect formation. They'll sail right into the debris cloud." Jake made his decision. "Do it. Karen, prepare the mining charges. Tony, target their lead ship the moment we clear the asteroid field. Lisa, I need you to thread us through those rocks like you're dancing." Aurora's Dawn plunged into the asteroid field with the 3 Korvaxi destroyers close behind. The aliens maintained their formation even among the floating rocks. confident in their superior technology and firepower. That confidence was about to cost them. Karen worked quickly to reprogram the mining charges. Instead of precise demolition tools, she turned them into crude but effective space mines. Charges ready, Captain. I've set them for maximum fragmentation. Deploy them, Jake ordered. The mining charges scattered among the asteroids like deadly seeds. The Korvaxi ships were halfway through the field when the first explosions began. Space lit up with brilliant flashes as the charges detonated inside the larger asteroids. Millions of rock fragments shot out in every direction, moving at tremendous speed. The lead Korvaxi destroyer flew directly into the debris cloud. Admiral Zethkar watched in shock as his lead ship's hull was torn apart by the storm of rock fragments. The vessel's shields flared and failed under the constant impacts. Hull plates buckled and atmosphere vented into space. "Evasive maneuvers," he shouted, but it was too late. The second destroyer tried to change course and collided with a large asteroid. The third ship managed to avoid the worst of the debris but took heavy damage to its weapon systems. On Aurora's dawn, the crew watched their improvised trap work better than they had dared hope. "Direct hit on the lead ship," Tony reported, with satisfaction. "She's badly damaged and falling behind. The second ship has collision damage. The third is still coming, but her weapons are offline." Jake felt a moment of fierce pride. Humans might be new to space warfare, but they had been perfecting the art of fighting dirty for centuries. "Lisa, bring us around." "Tony, target the damaged ship's engines." "Sir, are we really going to fight them?" Lisa asked, her voice uncertain. "We already are fighting them," Jake replied. "And we're winning." Aurora's dawn emerged from the asteroid field and came around in a tight turn that would have been impossible for the larger alien ships. Tony fired both plasma cannons at the third destroyer, aiming for the spots where Karen said the ship's armor looked weakest. The alien vessel returned fire, but their shots went wide. They were used to fighting opponents who fled in straight lines, not ships that twisted and turned like angry hornets. Meanwhile, the crew of the lead Korvaxi destroyer was struggling to control their dying ship. Half their systems were offline, and they were venting atmosphere from dozens of hull breaches. "Report," Admiral Zethkar demanded. "Sir, we have extensive damage to all decks. Engine power is down to 30%. Weapons are offline." Zethkar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. How had such a small, primitive ship inflicted so much damage? The humans had used their own environment as a weapon, turning harmless rocks into deadly projectiles. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "the third destroyer is requesting permission to withdraw. They've taken heavy damage and their weapons are destroyed." For the first time in his military career, Admiral Zethkar was facing defeat, at the hands of what should have been easy prey. These humans fought with cunning and desperation, using tactics no civilized species would consider. "All ships, withdraw to safe distance," he ordered reluctantly. "We need to report this to the War Council." On Aurora's dawn, the crew watched the alien ships retreat. "Should we pursue them?" Tony asked, his hands still on the weapons controls. Jake shook his head. "We've made our point. Besides, we need to get word back to Earth. This is just the beginning." Karen was already working on the long-range communications array. "Captain, I'm boosting the signal. Earth needs to know what's coming." Jake nodded grimly. The Korvaxi Empire had just learned that humans were not like other species. They did not surrender when faced with superior force. They got creative, they got angry, and they fought back with everything they had. The warning had been clear. Find easier prey elsewhere. Now the aliens would have to decide whether they were willing to pay the price for ignoring that advice. The first battle was over, but the war was just beginning. President Diana Foster stood before the emergency session of the Terran Federation Council, her face grave as she read the report from Aurora's dawn. The massive chamber was packed with representatives from every human colony, their voices creating a low buzz of worried conversation. "The message is clear," Diana said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "We are no longer alone in the galaxy, and our new neighbors are not friendly. Captain Morrison's report indicates that these Korvaxi view us as nothing more than another species to conquer." Senator William Hayes from the Mars colonies stood up. Madam President, surely we can negotiate. There must be some way to avoid war with an empire that has conquered 47 star systems. Diana's expression hardened. Senator Hayes, they didn't come to negotiate. They came to demand our surrender. The choice is simple. We fight or we become slaves. In the back of the chamber, General Richard Kane listened carefully to the debate. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes, a veteran of the border wars who had spent his career studying military history. While the politicians argued about diplomacy, Kane was already thinking about strategy. When Diana called for military advisement, Kane stood and walked to the speaker's podium. The chamber fell quiet as he began to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, I've studied the sensor data. From Aurora's dawn, the Korvaxi fight like every successful empire in history. They use overwhelming force, standard tactics, and they expect their enemies to surrender when faced with superior numbers. He paused and looked around the chamber. But they've made one critical mistake. They've never fought humans. Senator Hayes interrupted. General, we're talking about an empire with hundreds of ships and millions of soldiers. How can we possibly resist them? Kane smiled grimly. Because we're not like every other species they've conquered. When other civilizations see impossible odds, they surrender. When humans see impossible odds, we get angry. He activated the chamber's display screen, showing images from human military history. Thermopylae, the Alamo, Stalingrad, Rorke's Drift. Throughout our history, humans have faced overwhelming odds and chosen to fight anyway. Sometimes we lose, but we make the enemy pay such a high price that they think twice before attacking us again. The display showed battle formations and tactical diagrams. The Korvaxi use rigid military formations because they work against species that fight conventional battles. But humans don't fight conventional battles. We fight dirty. We use guerrilla tactics. We turn everything into a weapon. Diana nodded. What do you recommend, General? Total mobilization, Kane replied without hesitation. Every ship, every soldier, every civilian needs to be prepared for war. But not the kind of war the Korvaxi expect. We're going to show them what happens when you threaten a species that has been perfecting the art of warfare for 10,000 years. Meanwhile, on the edge of human space, Aurora's dawn was racing toward Earth with critical intelligence about the alien threat. Captain Jake Morrison had promoted Tony Rodriguez to acting commander of the ship's defensive systems, and the weapons specialist was busy analyzing everything they had learned about Korvaxi technology. Their ships are powerful but predictable, Tony explained to the crew during a briefing. They rely on heavy armor and standard energy weapons, but their tactics are completely inflexible. They fly in formation, they attack in straight lines, and they expect their enemies to do the same. Lisa Carter looked up from her navigation console. What about their numbers? The sensor readings showed at least 50 ships in that fleet. Karen Phillips, who had been studying the battle recordings, shook her head. Numbers don't matter if they can't adapt. We hurt them badly with improvised tactics and mining equipment. Imagine what we could do with actual military hardware. Jake nodded. That's exactly what I'm hoping Earth is preparing for. Back on Earth, General Kane was meeting with Admiral Patricia Hayes, the commander of the Terran Defense Force. Patricia was a tough woman in her 40s who had worked her way up through the ranks of the Space Navy. How many ships do we have? Kane asked. 43 combat vessels, including cruisers, destroyers, and frigates, Patricia replied, plus about 200 civilian ships that we could convert for military use. Kane studied the fleet roster. Not enough to match them ship for ship. We'll need to fight smarter, not harder. I've been thinking about that, Patricia said. Our ships are smaller and faster than theirs. We could use hit-and-run tactics, strike from unexpected angles, force them to spread their fleet thin. Kane smiled. Exactly what I was thinking, but we need more than just space tactics. If they break through our fleet, they'll try to invade our worlds. He turned to Colonel Ben Tucker, who had been quietly listening to the discussion. Tucker was a stocky man with weathered hands and a reputation for unconventional thinking. Ben, I need you to start preparing Earth's ground defenses, Kane said, but not traditional fortifications. These aliens expect armies to meet them in open battle. We're going to disappoint them. Tucker grinned. Guerrilla warfare? Every dirty trick in the book, Kane confirmed. Urban warfare, booby traps, improvised weapons, civilian resistance. We're going to turn every city, every building, every street corner into a battlefield. Dr. Matthew Bell, the head of xenobiology, had been studying the alien transmissions and battle footage. He joined the military briefing with an important observation. I've analyzed their communication patterns and tactical responses, he said. These Korvaxi have been successful for so long that they've become predictable. They follow the same patterns in every conquest because those patterns have always worked. What kind of patterns? Patricia asked. Overwhelming force followed by demands for surrender. When the enemy gives up, they occupy the world with minimal resistance. They've never had to adapt their tactics because no one has ever forced them. Kane leaned forward. You're saying they're not prepared for a real fight? I'm saying they don't know how to handle an enemy that refuses to surrender, Bell replied. Their entire military doctrine is based on intimidation and superior firepower. They've never faced an opponent that gets more dangerous when cornered. As the meeting continued, news came in that Aurora's Dawn had entered the solar system and was transmitting detailed intelligence about the Korvaxi fleet. The data confirmed what the military leaders suspected. The aliens were powerful but inflexible. General Kane stood up and addressed the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to teach the Korvaxi Empire a lesson they'll never forget. They think we're just another primitive species ready to surrender at the first sign of trouble. He paused and looked around at the determined faces of his officers. They're about to learn that humans don't surrender. We fight. And when we fight to win, no matter what the cost. Patricia Hayes smiled grimly. When do we start? We already have, Kane replied. Every ship, every soldier, every citizen of the Terran Federation is now part of this war effort. The Korvaxi wanted to conquer humanity. Instead, they're going to discover why we're the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The war preparations had begun, and humanity was about to show the galaxy what happened when you threatened a species that had turned warfare into an art form. War leader Vexthul stood on the command deck of his massive battleship, watching the holographic display that showed the human solar system. He was a towering figure even among his own species, with scars across his face from dozens of conquered worlds. Behind him, the largest invasion fleet in Korvaxi history moved through space like a metal storm. 217 warships, 4 million soldiers. Enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. It was the same force that had brought the mighty Zelkari Empire to its knees in just 6 months. War leader, his intelligence officer reported. Admiral Zethkar's initial assessment was correct. These humans occupy only one star system with 12 planets. Their largest world has approximately 8 billion inhabitants. Vexthul nodded. And their military strength? Minimal. Our scouts count fewer than 50 combat vessels. Their weapons technology appears to be at least a century behind our own. Yet they destroyed 3 of Zethkar's ships. Vexthul mused. How? The intelligence officer hesitated. The humans used unconventional tactics, sir. They weaponized their environment and attacked from unexpected angles. But against our full fleet, such tricks will be useless. Vexthul was not entirely convinced. In his 3 decades of conquest, he had learned to respect any enemy that fought back. Most species surrendered at the first sight of a Korvaxi fleet. The few that resisted usually lasted only days before their leaders begged for mercy. But these humans had been given a clear warning months ago, and they still chose to fight. Begin the approach, he ordered. Standard conquest formation. We will demonstrate the futility of resistance. Admiral Jake Morrison, recently promoted after his encounter with the Korvaxi scouts, watched the approaching alien fleet from the bridge of his new flagship, the battlecruiser Defiant. The human defense fleet was spread across the outer solar system in small groups, ready to execute the battle plan that General Kane had developed. My God, whispered Commander Lisa Carter, who had been promoted to serve as his tactical officer. There are so many of them. Jake studied the tactical display. The Korvaxi fleet was massive, but it was also moving in the same rigid formations they had observed before. Apparently, Early success had not taught them to adapt their tactics. "Tony, are the surprise packages ready?" Jake asked. Tony Rodriguez, now serving as Fleet Weapons Coordinator, grinned from his position at the Master Fire Control Station. "All civilian ships are in position, sir. The Korvaxi won't know what hit them." Dr. Samantha Price had spent months working with human military engineers to develop new weapons based on a simple principle. If the aliens expected conventional space combat, humans would give them anything but conventional. Her modifications to civilian cargo ships had turned them into floating bombs. "Fleet command to all units," Jake broadcast. "Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to make them pay such a high price that they regret coming here." The battle began when the Korvaxi fleet reached the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. War leader Vexthul expected the humans to meet them in traditional formation, capital ship against capital ship. Instead, the human fleet scattered like startled birds, breaking into dozens of small groups that attacked from every direction at once. "What are they doing?" Vexthul demanded as his tactical display showed human ships darting between his formations like angry insects. Captain Maria Santos led the first wave of converted civilian ships in a direct assault on the Korvaxi left flank. Her cargo hauler had been packed with explosives and fitted with the most powerful engines they could install. She aimed directly at the largest enemy battleship and activated her ship's autopilot. "This is Santos to Fleet Command," she radioed as she and her crew prepared to abandon ship. "Package delivered. See you on the other side." The cargo ship slammed into the Korvaxi battleship at tremendous speed, its explosive cargo detonating. On impact, the alien vessel's shields flared and collapsed, and the ship's hull cracked open like an egg. Similar attacks were happening throughout the Korvaxi formation. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Clark coordinated squadrons of modified fighters that swarmed around the larger alien ships, using suicide tactics that no civilized species would consider. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than we can count them," Ryan reported to Jake over the communications channel, "but we're taking them with us." Jake watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The human fleet was being destroyed, but they were making the aliens pay dearly for every victory. For every human ship lost, at least 2 Korvaxi vessels were damaged or destroyed. War leader Vexthul was experiencing something he had never felt before in decades of conquest: fear. His fleet was winning, but at a cost that horrified him. These humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to inflict maximum damage, even if it meant their own destruction. "Sir, the humans are ramming our ships," his tactical officer reported in disbelief. "They're using their own vessels as weapons." "This is madness," Vexthul muttered. "No rational species fights this way." But the humans were not done. As the battle raged around Jupiter, Colonel Ben Tucker activated the second phase of the defense plan. The planet's moons, which had been quietly evacuated and converted into weapon platforms, suddenly came alive with missile batteries and energy cannons. The Korvaxi found themselves caught in a crossfire between the mobile human fleet and fixed fortifications that they had not even detected. Their formation, designed to overwhelm a conventional enemy, became a liability as human weapons struck them from unexpected angles. "All ships, regroup and withdraw to safe distance," Vexthul ordered. He needed time to understand what was happening. Jake Morrison watched the alien fleet pull back and felt a moment of hope. The human defense force was nearly destroyed, but they had accomplished something remarkable. They had bloodied the nose of an empire that had never faced serious resistance. "Fleet casualties?" he asked. Tony checked his tactical display. "We've lost 31 ships, sir, but the aliens have lost at least 60 with many more damaged." Lisa looked up from her sensor station. "Sir, they're regrouping. I think they're preparing for another attack." Jake nodded. "Then we'll be ready for them. Send a message to Earth. Tell them we've given them time to prepare ground defenses. The next phase is up to Colonel Tucker and his people." As the battered human fleet prepared for the aliens' next assault, Jake realized that they had already achieved something important. They had shown the Korvaxi that humans were not like other species. They did not surrender when faced with superior force. They fought harder, The space battle was far from over, but humanity had sent a clear message to the galaxy. They would not go quietly into slavery. Every inch of space, every planet, every moon would have to be paid for in blood. War leader Vexthul stared at his casualty reports and wondered if his empire had made a terrible mistake. These humans fought with a savagery that defied logic. They seemed to welcome death as long as they could take their enemies with them. For the first time in his military career, he began to doubt whether conquest was worth the price these primitives were demanding. War leader Vexthul stood among the ruins of what had once been downtown Chicago, his massive frame casting long shadows in the smoky air. 3 months had passed since his fleet had finally broken through the human space defenses and landed on Earth. 3 months of the most brutal fighting he had ever experienced. His army of 4 million soldiers had been reduced to less than 2 million. Every city block was a battlefield. Every building was a fortress. Every human civilian was a potential enemy combatant. "Report," he demanded from his field commander. Commander Tekval approached with visible exhaustion. Like all Korvaxi officers, he had expected Earth to surrender within days of the landing. Instead, they had been fighting street by street, building by building, room by room. "Sir, we have secured the northern district of this city. Casualties were heavy. The humans had turned every structure into a killing zone." Vexthul nodded grimly. The humans had evacuated their major population centers before the invasion, but they had left behind something far worse than civilians. They had left behind traps, weapons, and soldiers who seemed to have no fear of death. "What about the other cities?" "Similar reports from all fronts, sir. New York, Los Angeles, London, Tokyo. The humans refused to surrender any ground without making us pay for it." Sergeant Major Pete Williams crouched behind the wreckage of an overturned bus, watching the Korvaxi patrol move down what used to be Main Street. His squad of 12 soldiers had been holding this position for 6 days, and they had turned the surrounding buildings into a maze of death. "Remember, wait for my signal," he whispered into his radio. "Let them get close." The aliens moved in their standard formation, confident in their superior armor and weapons. They had learned to be more cautious since landing on Earth, but they still fought like a traditional army. They expected their enemies to wear uniforms and follow the rules of civilized warfare. Pete and his people had thrown those rules out the window on day 1. The Korvaxi patrol reached the intersection where Pete's squad had spent 2 days setting up their trap, hidden charges under the street, sniper positions in 3 different buildings, escape routes through the sewers. "Now," Pete whispered. The street exploded upward as the buried charges detonated. The Korvaxi soldiers were thrown. In all directions, their formation shattered. Before they could recover, human snipers opened fire from the surrounding buildings. Major Linda Thompson watched through her rifle scope as the alien patrol stumbled into the kill zone. She had been a competitive shooter before the war, winning championships across North America. Now those skills were being put to deadlier use. She aimed for the gap in a Korvaxi officer's armor and squeezed the trigger. The alien dropped, and Linda was already moving to her next position before his body hit the ground. The human defenders had learned that they could not match the aliens in direct combat. Korvaxi soldiers were bigger, stronger, and better armored. But humans were smarter, faster, and more creative. They fought like ghosts, striking from unexpected directions and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Jack Harper and his team held a position in what used to be a shopping mall. They had turned the building into a fortress with overlapping fields of fire and multiple escape routes. When the Korvaxi finally stormed the building, they found themselves trapped in a labyrinth of improvised barriers and hidden weapons. "Harper to base," Jack radioed as his team fell back to their secondary positions. "Mall is lost, but we took 50 of them with us. Moving to fallback position 7. The radio crackled with similar reports from across the city. Human defenders trading their lives for Korvaxi casualties at rates that horrified the alien commanders. Colonel Ben Tucker sat in his underground command center, coordinating the defense of Earth through a network of hidden communication lines. The original plan had been to make the invasion so costly that the aliens would give up and leave. That plan was working, but the price was terrible. Sir, we're getting reports from all sectors, his communications officer reported. The pattern is consistent. We're inflicting heavy casualties, but we're losing ground. Tucker studied the tactical displays showing battles raging across the globe. Red zones marked areas under alien control. Blue zones showed human resistance. The map was mostly red now, but each red zone had cost the Korvaxi hundreds of soldiers. What? About civilian casualties? Tucker asked. Lower than expected, sir. The evacuation plans worked. Most non-combatants are in the underground shelters or have been moved to the rural zones. That was something, at least. The humans had learned from their own history. Cities could be rebuilt. People could not be replaced. Dr. Samantha Price worked frantically in her hidden laboratory, developing new weapons for the resistance fighters. Her latest creation was a modified version of industrial mining equipment that could be triggered remotely. The aliens had no idea that the very ground beneath their feet could become a weapon. The new charges are ready, she reported to Tucker over the secure channel. Distribution begins tonight. Meanwhile, war leader Vexthul received reports that made his blood run cold. His intelligence officers had finally figured out what made human resistance so effective. It was not just their tactics or their weapons, it was their psychology. Sir, we have analyzed the human behavior patterns, his chief analyst reported. These creatures appear to become more dangerous when facing impossible odds. Instead of surrendering, they fight harder. Vexthul stared at the casualty reports. 3 months of fighting had cost him more soldiers than the previous 10 conquests combined. This is impossible. No species fights this way. Sir, we have also discovered something else. The humans have been studying warfare for their entire history. They have books, films, and training programs dedicated to every form of combat ever devised. They have turned violence into an art form. The analyst activated a display showing human military history. Thousands of years of conflict, innovation, and adaptation. They have fought each other for millennia, developing tactics and strategies that no other species has ever needed to learn. Vexthul felt something he had never experienced before: doubt about the Empire's ability to win. How many more soldiers will it take to conquer this world? At current casualty rates, sir, we estimate we would need at least 10 times our current force, and that assumes the humans do not adapt their tactics further. The war leader looked out at the burning city and wondered if his empire had finally encountered an enemy they could not defeat. Every victory came at such a high cost that it felt like defeat. Every captured building was paid for with blood. In Chihuahua, a hidden bunker beneath the city, Pete Williams cleaned his rifle and prepared for another night of guerrilla warfare. His squad had been reduced to 8 men, but they had killed over 200 aliens in the past month. You think they'll give up and leave? Asked one of his soldiers. Pete checked his ammunition and smiled grimly. Doesn't matter. We keep fighting, until they do, or until there's none of us left to fight. That was the human way. No surrender, no retreat, no mercy. The Korvaxi had come to conquer a species that would rather die fighting than live as slaves. War leader Vexthul was beginning to understand that some victories were not worth winning. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his rebuilt flagship, watching the final battle unfold in Earth's orbit. 6 months had passed since the Korvaxi invasion began, and the alien fleet was a shadow of its former strength. What had started as 200 ships was now barely 50, and those remaining vessels showed the scars of constant human attacks. The human fleet had been rebuilt using captured Korvaxi technology and salvaged materials. Dr. Samantha Price had worked day and night to reverse engineer alien weapon systems, creating hybrid ships that combined human tactics with alien firepower. Sir, the Korvaxi are trying to establish a defensive formation around their command ship, reported Commander Lisa Carter from her tactical station. Jake smiled grimly. After months of fighting, the aliens were still using predictable formations. They had never learned to adapt. Major Davis, are your boarding teams ready? He asked. Major Kelly Davis nodded from her position near the airlock. She commanded a unit of Marines who specialized in capturing enemy ships from the inside. It was a tactic that the Korvaxi had never encountered before the human war. Ready and willing, sir. My people are eager to return the favor for everything these aliens have done to Earth. On the planet's surface, War Leader Vexthul stood in the ruins of what had been his command center. The building had been destroyed by human saboteurs 3 days ago, forcing him to relocate to a heavily defended position outside the city. His remaining ground forces were trapped in scattered pockets across the globe. Every supply convoy was attacked by human guerrillas. Every communication was intercepted and decoded. Every position was under constant threat. "Sir, we have lost contact with the garrison in London," reported his aide. "Intelligence suggests they were overrun by human resistance fighters." Vexthul felt the weight of failure crushing down on him. In 6 months of fighting, his army had conquered less than a quarter of one planet. The cost had been staggering. Nearly 3 million soldiers lost, hundreds of ships destroyed, and they were no closer to victory than when they had started. "What is our current strength?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Approximately 800,000 troops planet-wide, sir. Most units are reporting severe losses and low morale." Low morale. Vexthul had never heard those words used to describe Korvaxi soldiers before. His people had conquered the galaxy through superior force and unshakable confidence. But these humans had broken something fundamental in his army's spirit. Colonel Ben Tucker emerged from his underground command center for the first time in weeks. The human resistance had finally gained enough strength to begin offensive operations. Instead of just defending against alien attacks, they were now hunting down Korvaxi positions and destroying them. "Sir, we have confirmation from all resistance cells," his communications officer reported. "Operation Payback is ready to begin." Tucker nodded. Operation Payback was the human plan to systematically eliminate every alien position on Earth. They had spent months learning Korvaxi tactics, studying their weaknesses, and preparing for this moment. "Execute the operation," he ordered. Across the globe, human resistance fighters began coordinated attacks on alien positions. Sergeant Major Pete Williams led his surviving squad in an assault on a Korvaxi supply depot. Major Linda Thompson provided sniper support as resistance cells stormed alien strongholds. Jack Harper commanded urban warfare specialists who turned the aliens' own tactics against them. But the humans had learned something more important than tactics. They had learned to use the aliens' psychology against them. In orbit, Jake Morrison's fleet launched its final assault on the remaining Korvaxi ships. But instead of the wild, desperate attacks the aliens expected, the human fleet moved with precision and coordination. They had studied alien technology, adapted their tactics, and turned the enemy's strengths into weaknesses. "All ships execute Maneuver 7, Jake commanded. The human fleet split into multiple groups that attacked the Korvaxi formation from every angle simultaneously. Major Davis led her boarding teams in assault shuttles that punched through alien defenses and delivered Marines directly onto enemy ships. The Korvaxi found themselves fighting battles on multiple fronts at once. Human Marines stormed their vessels while human ships pounded them from outside. It was a coordinated assault that used every lesson learned from months of desperate fighting. On the Korvaxi command ship, Admiral Zethkar watched his fleet being systematically destroyed. He was the same officer who had led the first contact with humans months ago. The small exploration ship that had embarrassed his squadron seemed like a minor problem compared to what he faced now. "Sir, the humans are boarding the flagship," his tactical officer reported with panic in his voice. Zethkar drew his sidearm as the sound of fighting echoed through his ship's corridors. These humans fought with a savagery that his people could not match. They seemed to welcome close combat, turning every corridor into a battlefield. Major Davis and her Marines fought their way through the alien ship with ruthless efficiency. They used tactics learned from months of urban warfare on Earth, treating the ship's corridors like city streets and its compartments like buildings to be cleared. "Bridge secured," Davis reported as her team overwhelmed the last of the ship's defenders. On Earth's surface, War Leader Vexthul received the final transmission from his fleet. The human assault had broken through their defenses. The orbital battle was lost, and with it, any hope of reinforcement or evacuation. He stood, alone in his command bunker, surrounded by the wreckage of his invasion force. Outside, human voices could be heard as resistance fighters closed in on his position. A communication panel crackled to life, and a familiar voice spoke in clear Korvaxi. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Terran Federation. War Leader Vex Thul. Your fleet is destroyed and your army is defeated. I'm offering you one chance to surrender." Vex Thul stared at the communication device. The voice belonged to the same human captain who had refused his surrender demand months ago. The primitive explorer had become the admiral who destroyed his empire's greatest fleet. "You told us to flee," Vex Thul said quietly. "We should have listened." "Yes, you should have," Morrison replied. "But you didn't, and now you know why we gave you that warning. Humans don't surrender, War Leader. We fight until we win or until we're all dead. Today we won." Vex Thul looked around his ruined command center and made his decision. "I surrender my remaining forces to the Terran Federation." The first war between humanity and the Korvaxi Empire was over, but the real victory was not the destruction of the alien fleet or the defeat of their army. The real victory was the message that would spread throughout the galaxy. Within weeks, the surviving Korvaxi ships limped back to their home territory, carrying news that would shake the Empire to its core. They had encountered a species that could not be conquered, a civilization that grew stronger under pressure, a race that treated warfare as an art form. Admiral Zethkar stood before the Empire's High Council, delivering his final report. "The humans are unlike any species we have encountered. They do not fear death. They do not surrender when faced with superior force. They become more dangerous when cornered." He paused and looked around the chamber. "My recommendation is absolute. Declare human space forbidden territory. Mark their systems as unconquerable. They warned us to flee. We ignored that warning and paid the price. The Korvaxi Empire, for the first time in its 1,000-year history, officially declared a species too dangerous to attack. The warning had been clear. Flee. The galaxy had learned to listen. Humanity's reputation spread among the stars. They were the species that turned mining equipment into weapons, the civilization that welcomed impossible odds, the race that would rather die fighting than live as slaves. The Terran Federation had won more than a war. They had won their place in the galaxy as the species that no empire dared to threaten. The warning was clear, and now the entire galaxy understood. Some prey, fights back,